Hello everybody and welcome to GameGuru MAX live broadcast number 65. Counting them all up, guys and gals, a 65. So before I go any further, want to make sure everyone can hear me. I do some extra tests these days with microphones, so this is going to be academic, this question in time, but for now hopefully everyone can hear me resonate through the technology. I'll just wait for a little bit of a thumbs up and then I will crack on with what I want to show you today. We can hear you. Thank you very much, Brevin. A well-prepared sentence. Okay, let me show you some stuff. I'll launch the software. Two things I want to show you. The first thing is a continuation of what I was revealing last Wednesday. As you remember, perhaps, if you was joining in last week, we was talking about physics, but I couldn't show you everything that I had planned, but by Friday I had actually implemented what I was talking about, so now I can actually show you that this week. You notice we cleaned up the grid a little bit. It was using a normal map with some roughiness on it. We've got rid of that now. We're using the actual official clean normal map for the blank grid level situations. Okay, let me go straight in and add some objects to show you what I'm talking about. Last week we talked about convex hulls, the idea that you can speed up the detection of the physics when you run up to it by reducing the number of polygons that are being used. And you'll remember the two examples that I gave you was that structure I've just dropped down and Sanguaro form A. You'll remember that. We made a convex hull out of that. But anyone who thought, oh, well, we'll try that on, say, something like Twin Spires Rock, you would have had a different experience altogether. For those who need a little bit of a recap, convex hull wraps up a object in a very low polygon shape that you then test your collision against, so you can't run through an object. The problem with a single convex hull is you can't have holes in it. It basically wraps it up in the smallest shape it can create without any sort of concave features. And what I suggested is that I could implement something called hull decomposition. Oh, P.S. Did you see how fast that was? One of our other optimizations we've been working on is extremely fast physics generation, extremely fast nav mesh generation. But this is the bit I want to show you. Physics on. Nice little mode you get when you're in developer mode. Now what you're looking at, you're not looking at one convex hull per object, you're looking at several. So this, although it might look like it's taken the form of the polygons, it's actually three, maybe three or four convex hulls. There's one for the top bit and one for each side. And of course this is a single object, but it's got a hole in the middle so I can run through. And they're building with the hole. The convex hull of the cactus that you saw in last Wednesday's broadcast was just a crude shape. But what if I wanted to throw a small stone between those two vegetable outcrops? In a convex hull, single convex hull, you couldn't do it. It would just bounce off something that seems to be invisible. Now you actually have probably about 20 or 30 small convex hulls. You can see how they're all separated there. In order to represent the shape, but not taking 33,000 polygons to do it. And so you've got this wonderful fast physics now using multiple convex hulls per object. And this is the ultimate test. You might have got away with a convex hull with this cactus. There is no way you'd have got away with a single convex hull on this, because you want to be able to run through the middle of the structure, and you simply couldn't do that. You could do it if you just made it all polygon collision, but then as soon as you got into these little details down here, you'd notice that your physics would increase in calculation, have a few of those in your scene, and it would all start stuttering and not being very smooth. With hull decomposition producing multiple convex hulls, we now have the best of every world. Fast physics. Hull decomposition takes some time. I mean, in some cases, this structure probably took about 30 seconds to generate. So another little thing that we did, after we've generated our multiple convex hulls, we save them out as a .bullet file and include it in the object library. So the next time the object is wanting to do a hull decomposition, there's a new collision mode for that, it will just see if the file exists. If the file exists, it loads it in and it becomes instantaneous. So that's something that I talked about last week, but only today, this Wednesday, can I actually demonstrate it in action. So that should take care of the lion's share of all of our collision issues, terrain or otherwise. So please try it out with your own objects and see if there's anything that we've missed. In the meanwhile, we'll be working on going through the 1,000 and something objects in our library to make sure that every object is using the correct and most appropriate collision system. And you may run across a few objects that have got it slightly wrong. Certainly let us know, but we're also going through that process ourselves to make sure that we have the best collision for each object. So that's the first thing I wanted to demo, really just to finish off what I was talking about last Wednesday. The second part is, for the longest time, I wanted to combine the shooter games mode and the object mode, and it made no sense to have them completely separate. What I mean by all that is, you see this button here, shooter games? This is now actually a filter, an on-off filter. So when I select it, look what happens. An extra row of icons now appears on the left. If I click it again, switches it off. Think of it as some extra functionality that you may not want all the time, but when you're working on visual logic, you switch it on to get extra access to things more or less related to creating shooter style games. So it's no longer its own panel, it's simply an extra filter which literally gives access to these objects and some other things which I'll show you now. So let's say I wanted to have a situation in my game where when I walk through this tunnel, it alerts an enemy. And makes some noise, and all battle commences. So we've dropped in our little zone. We'll drop in a character. This guy will do. And immediately, because we're actually on the shooter games filter mode, you instantly have access to all of these nodes. So I can drag this node, connect it up to the zone, go into this relational. So you see how it adds it to the top, shooter connections. So in this situation, we can do lots of things. It's bi-directional. If you walk into something can happen to this. Something happens to the character, you can do something with the zone. So it gives you every option. In this case, we want to alert the character. And another thing that you couldn't do before is now I can just drag an object, hide him around over here. You're still in the shooter filter mode, but now you've actually got this connection. So the idea, of course, is when you run through there, he gets alerted, and of course he comes running. So that's much better. You'll never leave the object tools mode now. You can do your visual logic editing if you've got your filter on, but you still have access to all the important things you're going to need. For example, let's say just click on the character. You want access to his behavior. You want access to his properties and what he's going to do in this particular situation. You know, that disappeared in last week's build, but now it's actually exactly where you want it. And it's not just limited to characters. If I go into my Max collection and look for a door frame, and then get a door, pop that in there, get a bit closer. I'm going to drop in a tiny whiny key, like so. See a key there. As you would imagine, all our objects are pre-configured, ready to rock for your game levels. So the key already knows it's a key, so it's got a key behavior. The door already knows it's a door, so it has a door behavior. But the idea with having the shooter filter mode is that then you can connect the two together. So let me just try to get the little link on. Well, obviously development version, of course. So you can imagine that linking up much like this character linked up to this shape. And the idea is you don't have to go in and edit little if used fields or go into script to say what's what. All you've really got to do is associate this key with this door, and that's as much you need to do. And when you run the game, you'll be able to collect the key. The key already knows its association with this particular door as opposed to, say, another door, and so you know this key will open that, and etc. So that's the idea of the visual logic system. For the most part, the objects are already pre-configured with the desired behaviors, but then that last piece, instead of just an individual object on its own, you are now creating a logical landscape of how these objects interact with each other. So for example, just to embellish this, let's say we don't just want all the soldiers to come running at you, you want all guns a-blazing and lights screaming and noises. So if I say pick this object and just pop it in here, and then we drag in a light, drop that in there, change the movement mode, so we bring it up a little bit, just get it like this. Again, you'll notice that the light, obviously I'm not getting that one right, it needs to be a bit further, there you go. Again, you can make the same connection, you can say, this may not connect, but we're going to give it a go anyway, connect that to that. And then all of a sudden, if we actually just look at the different relational modes, which you always find at the top, so I've kept this button and this close together so you can instantly see it coming on and off, so you know you're at mode. So we've got some options. We want to activate the object. In this case, it's the light, so that's the situation. Can you guess what that's going to do? It's doing two things now. You've just added logic. You can have multiple logics based on a single event. The event, of course, is this player running through the zone. Can you guess the two things that are going to happen? Of course, the character's now been alerted, so he's going to run to the player's position, or at least to the zone, to find out what's going on. And the light switches on and off. Or does it? The light itself has behaviors. If you now notice the benefit of having object tools, we've actually got light behavior, that you can select multiple things. So based on the activation of that object, what do you want the light to do? Well, we want it nice and simple, so it's just a simple on and off light. And there you go, you've configured your logic. You never had to script, you never had to worry about obscure properties buried deep in the general or the developer mode section. It's all very visual. Now, as of Wednesday, and as you've seen demonstrated when I tried to connect a key and a door, I am still working on all of these basic logics. So think of things like switches on walls to switch lights on and off, keys that open doors, and other simple logic units that then, now I've activated the object mode and connected it to the shooter games, all of these little logics will actually work for the Friday build. And that way we've got more of the software. You can actually start creating your own level logic without me dragging it on. I was going to do lots of character logic work, but that's an ongoing process, a lot of iteration there. And I felt because this was a relatively quick thing to put in, I can get it into the Friday build so you can start playing with logic, start crafting your own logic, whilst you let me get on and do some super sophisticated soldier AI and finishing off the zombie AI as well. So in addition to that, I'm going to also mention, and I'm not going to demonstrate it because we want to show it only when you're going to get access to it. So I want to show you stuff that then when you get the Friday build, you'll be able to play around with the things that I've been talking about. But verbally, I can say that we are making some extraordinary progress on the terrain side. We've really cracked the generation of trees. So no longer will you be adding in individual cacti. This won't be the way. Our current test system, we're doing some very good performance metrics on it, is we have 400,000 trees scattered over as far as you can see from a first person perspective, and even quite a liberal quantity of trees viewed from orbit. So we spent a lot of time making sure that was super fast, and not only that, the transitions were very good and the trees look really good up close and really good in the distance. So I'm looking forward to showing you that, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We're so confident that we're happy with the trees. We've already moved on to sculpting, so we're working on the sculpting now. Again, phenomenally good. Don't want to big it up too much because I'm always going to create disappointment doing it that way. But when you actually select a piece of terrain and raise it, the sides actually texture correctly and it just looks so natural, even if you were forcing a little blob higher than it was procedurally generated. And manual editing and procedural generation blends very nicely together as well. So looking forward to showing you a little bit more of that. And the other thing that's been worked on, again I can't show it to you until I can deliver it to you in a Friday build, is the game project system. We was accused, and quite rightly so, for many years we was nothing more than a glorified level editor. And if you wanted to make an actual game, you had to go and start scripting and putting images in certain folders, and it's like, you know, I could have done this myself programming if it was going to be this difficult. So we're going to create something that lets you create whole game projects. That means you'll be able to create your own loading screens and main menu screens in win game and lose game screens, and chaining multiple levels together in linear and non-linear fashion. And we're calling it the storyboard. We are making extraordinary progress. It's looking very cool indeed. Again, hopefully be able to show you that in a couple of weeks when we'll be able to make our version that works well enough to include in a Friday build so you can play with it. Let us know what you think. So that's it for the juicy bits for this week's content reveal. I'm now going to switch over to questions. I usually ask everyone to ask some questions and put question marks at the end. I completely forgot to preface this live broadcast with that. Hopefully you kind of got the gist that we've got a live chat going on. If you've got a question, I'm happy to answer it. So let's see who gets the honour of the first question. This is one from Namco. When GameGuru MAX game engine coming to Steam? 30th of November. So keep an eye out for the 30th of November. If we have something we're happy with releasing onto Steam, you will get it on Steam. I think we will. I'm quietly confident. Thanks, GameGuru moderator, for making that answer. Probably didn't need to answer it, did I? But I'm just going to ram off the questions and not try and read ahead. Who's got the next question mark? Bouncy Sky 152 asks, how's the lakes coming along? Very good indeed. We've improved our water. All you've really got to do is lower the terrain below the water table, and now you get lovely lakes. And in that way you can create lakes, multiple lakes, or you can make a huge lake all the way around your landmass, and then you've just created an island. So yeah, we have some good control over whether you've got a watery world or a very terrainy world. We can't wait. Nor can I. I'm looking forward to making some games myself. Here's a question from Synchro62. Will the multiple convex hulls solve the steps solution during turning into a ramp? Great question. And it was one of the last things I was working on before I decided to get a bit of logic in. Because, you know, there is a case to answer that. When you get your Friday builds, you want to be doing different things. You're just watching me do physics week after week. And that was one of the things I stopped at, because when I tried to take one of our buildings, some of them worked really well, but one of the more complicated buildings with all of the little polygons for the steps, when I tried to give that to hull decomposition, the stairs were great. The staircase turned into a ramp, and it was very nice and smooth, and characters could smoothly move up and down it. But it blocked off the windows and some of the doors. And no matter how many tweaks I did to the settings, it just wouldn't give me that perfect decomposition. I think it's because the model's just too complex. So we're looking at a couple of ways in which we can solve that. And another option, which is we don't even try. Maybe hull decomposition can only handle a certain complexity of model. The traditional route, the ones that most modern games do, they just give the polygon to an artist, and the artist does a low polygon collision mesh version of that building, and then you load that in separately. We currently don't have that mode, but we are looking at it to maybe that is the solution for more complicated building structures. And so that file, that collision mesh, would be just a file sitting alongside the object. And then it gives the artist full control over exactly where you want your collision detail to be. So hopefully that answers the question. But yes, in certain situations you can have steps that when you give it to the hull decomposition, it gives you a nice ramp, which is exactly what we want when we're having AI characters moving around with capsules. So looking for another question. Here's one from Matthew Clark. Will GameGuru MAX ever allow multiple people working on a game title simultaneously, 2 or 3 logged in at once? Yeah, my dream feature actually. I think it is the future. Ever since I used Google Docs, and multiple people writing the document at the same time was just like mind-blowing. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that in GameGuru MAX? Not for release, not for 2021, but I assure you it's something I personally would like to see. I think it would be an awesome feature, but certainly not on our roadmap. There's plenty of things to get right before we indulge in such clever little toys. Looking for a new question from a new person. We can dream, can't we? The answer is yes, we can dream. Another question from Bouncy Sky. Why not Linux and Mac? It takes long enough to create something on the PC. And we've been selling and developing software for over a decade, well over a decade in fact, and the numbers just don't stack up. You know, it's like you might have 3% Linux and maybe 10% at most Mac users, and then 90% PC users. So if we're going to spend our limited resources and time, wouldn't it be best to focus on that 90% who then could get more cooler features in the product? So that's kind of the logic we're thinking right now. Absolutely prove me wrong. But that's what we look at, and that's how we have decided just to focus on PC, at least for now. And so let's just get this product right. Once this product is right, then we can indulge in looking at other platforms, etc., and brand new features we can crowbar in. Looking at the clock, I have burst past the 20-minute mark. I always try and aim for 15, never really do 15, so 20 minutes is the new 15. And now we're 21 minutes in. So I'll pick 2 more questions, and the rest of the questions I'll answer in the GameGuru forums later on today, along with a recording of this broadcast. And I always pick people who haven't asked a question before. And the luckiest person on that score is Far Cry. Funnily enough, will we be able to change FPE settings in real time without restarting? No. I know what you mean. We do put a lot of settings in the what we call the ELIPROF, which is like a subset of the FPE settings that you can then edit, at least in edit time. But I think what you're asking is you're actually running the game and then go into the parent object and change a parent setting, and then it iterates through the entire level as you're watching it. That is not that is not for release this year. I do like the idea. It's just fundamentally fraught with problems. You'd have to basically prepare all the objects in the level when you change one of those settings. But as I said, the entity properties, the things that you actually see on the right side of the screen, those are readily changeable on a per object basis, I'd say. You can't edit the parent. The parent is the domain of, it's for us to look after. We'll give you a library of 1,000 objects all set up and ready to work in the game. For you to then go in and change that parent setting and mess it up, you basically mess up the object in your library. So the next time you drop it in, it doesn't work, and you probably blame us. So yeah, we keep the FPE pretty protected, but you can change the instances of anything that you clone off that FPE setup. And right underneath it, question asker, who's not asked one before, is will GameGuru MAX support Parallax? There's 2 L's in Parallax, I think. Great word though. Parallax maps. So the idea that you could have a floor, say cobbles, and just for anyone who doesn't know what parallax is, and it's usually flat. If you get close enough to the cobbles, you go, hey, wait a minute, that's super flat terrain. But what parallax does, it uses the normal data, or maybe a height data, and it pulls that cobble up, so it looks 3D. Even though it's a flat polygon, the renderer can make it look bumpy and 3D, and you can use it for all kinds of cool things, not least of which is a form of displacement maps for terrain. So little rocks on your terrain would suddenly pop out. The only reason we've not already done it, because it is such a cool feature, is it's a performance hog. You know, once you've got like a couple of 1,000 polygons using that technique, if you've got a medium-sized PC, it will just slow to a crawl. And that's the only reason we've not already put it in. I'm pretty sure Wicked Engine already supports it, but that's the reason why I've not already seen it. I'm certainly not ruling it out, but it will be done based on what we can get away with, based on the minimum and recommended specs when we finally decide those for GameGuru MAX's launch. So that's it from me for this week. As I said, the rest of the questions I will tackle later on. No worries, I won't miss any. And if I have missed any up down to the thread, it's only because maybe it was time for answering questions from someone who hadn't had a chance to get an answer from me. So as always, the things that you see today you will get in Friday's build in 2 days' time, along with any more code that I can squeeze in those next 2 days, including functional small logic, of which I've demonstrated so far. So until next Friday, because it's always, next Wednesday at 4 p.m. British Summer Time, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and I'll speak to you all again next week. Goodbye.